Hi everybody, welcome to day 3 of 31 days of makeup. I'm sorry that this is the second day in a row that I'm filming at night. I just keep getting busy with other things during the day, and this is the time that I have to do it. Today I thought it might be fun to do a gothic fairy look because we're kind of lucky as goth people. Since people already kind of expect us to look weird and over the top, we have an easier time getting away with things like that. And fairy is a cool thing to experiment with when it comes to makeup because it's a very vague and broad idea for a look. It can encompass almost anything. I don't know about you, but when I think of fairies, I tend to think of facial features that are almost like gelflings from the Dark Crystal and elves from the Elder Scrolls series. So very elongated eyes and small features and heavy cheekbones and everything. And so I thought it might be fun to go for something like that today. And Phoenix is in the next room still doing her Inktober stuff, so I asked her what color she thinks that I should do, and she said it might be fun to use some golds and greens today. And even though when you first hear it, gold and green might not sound like the most gothic colors in the world, they're very easy colors to incorporate into a dark gothic makeup. So I'm going to begin by just doing my facial contour and the shape I want my face to look like, and then I'm gonna do my eyes and then add the rest of the color anywhere that needs to go. So here we go. Since the main colors in this fairy look are going to be green and gold, I don't want to use my usual contour color because you want to look inhuman. You want to look like you're from the earth and not a human being. So I'm going to contour in a similar way I usually would, but instead of using the kind of tan gray color I usually do, I'm using Marsh from the Lime Crime Venus 2 palette. It's a very earthy forest green color, so it works really well for things like this. That's plenty dark already. For any of you who have never owned anything Lime Crime before, the reason I like their eyeshadow palettes so much when it comes to things like what I'm doing now, like really crazy gothic makeup looks and stuff, is that not only do they have very versatile color ranges that suit pretty much any skin tone, but they're different because they're actually, as far as I know, all pressed pigment palettes, which means that the color payoff is a lot more intense than a regular eyeshadow palette. Now I'm just going to go ahead and blend all of that in really well. Even though it's an unnatural color, you want the blending to look as natural as possible. Because of the lighting I have to have in here tonight, it is going to show up a little differently than it would if I were doing this during the day. And that's actually an interesting point to make about makeup in general. If you're just getting started in makeup, especially a gothic makeup, where you're going to have things look a little heavier and different than they would on just a regular makeup look, it's good to practice the look you're going for during the day and at night, so that you know if it's going to show up at night, if it's going to look like you don't even have human facial features anymore at night. You don't want it to look weird in one lighting situation and good in another. Now I'm going to go for my highlight. Highlight is extremely important when you're doing fairy looks because you want it to look very ethereal and iridescent and shimmery and beautiful because fairy magic. Since we're doing green and gold for this look, I thought it would be really pretty to go in with Fly from the Lime Crime Venus 2 palette because it's like a really light shimmery gold with green flecks in it, and I can hardly explain just how pretty it is. You'll just have to see for yourself. It's a really wonderful highlight color if you're going for kind of a forest colored look. See what I mean? But it doesn't really work for every single look out there. You have to pick and choose what it's going to look good with. Now, in terms of highlighting for just fairy looks in general, you can either do what I'm doing where you do kind of your normal highlighting routine only with a different, more, you know, quirky color scheme, or you can do kind of like a few years ago when they did that full face of highlighters look to give it that extra push, or you can just glitter bomb yourself afterwards. Sky's the limit. You can do pretty much whatever you want. It's a very free look to go for. I'm generally someone who likes to go in and do their eyebrows last because I'm never sure exactly what shape I'm going to do for my eyeshadow, and I'm never sure what colors I want them to be. But since I actually know this time, I am actually going to do my eyebrows next, and the palette I'm using is unfortunately not one that you can get anymore. It's the Urban Decay Ammo palette. It was the first higher end brand anything I ever owned and loved it, so whenever I managed to find it on, you know, Mercari or Poshmark or something, I nab it. And I'm going to use the shade Mildew to do my eyebrows. I'm not 100%, but I believe all of the colors in this palette are ones you can just buy on their own, so even if you can't get a hold of the palette anymore, you can at least get the color. I'm actually going to do my eyebrows a lot higher than they actually are because it'll make more sense once I finish the look. I need to have that extra room to look a little more inhuman. It is such a lovely color. I'm not giving myself too much of an arch. Actually, I'm not even going to do this. I want to make it so they go upward. Even more fairy-like now. Two things you should know if you're someone who struggles to paint your eyebrows on are: one, all of us do, and two, concealer makes an amazing eraser. Next is time for the eyeshadow, so I'm going to go into that Lime Crime palette again, and I'm going to take the color Mustard, which is basically, as it says, it's a mustard yellow. Originally I was going to use Double Scoop from Jeffree Star, but I find that that one's a little bit darker, and I don't want to make anything too overpowering just for the base. This is just a base you're laying down because you want to almost look like a little flower. To pull it away from your eye like this because the shape of a fairy's eye, you're gonna want it to be really, really long. So don't go for too round of a look for this. Think cat eye, but with everything that you're doing. So for the next part, I'm grabbing that palette I showed you yesterday, the Alice Through the Looking Glass palette. Unfortunately, unlike the Ammo palette, I don't think you can get these shades individually. It was just a one-off thing. I'm using Hatter, which is just a very bright, vibrant green. It's a little more of an emerald green rather than a forest green. and I'm gonna just lay that down over the top of what I just did and leave just a little bit of that yellow at the top. It's okay if it doesn't look perfect right away, because we're actually going to add a little bit more depth to it afterwards with another shade. Now to deepen that up, I'm going into the Lime Crime palette again, and I'm going to take Pigeon and use it to add a little bit more depth to my eye. I can't begin to explain what that shade is. It's gorgeous though. It's like it has every color imaginable. I mean, they named it perfectly. It looks like a pigeon's wings basically. If you decide after watching this video that you want to get that Lime Crime palette, it is a gorgeous palette to use, especially if you like darker, more alternative looks. But I'd say also proceed with caution, since it is a pressed pigment palette rather than just a powdered, you know, mica pigment type thing. It does have more fallout, and some of the shades aren't that bad, like Jam and Filter and Marsh and Mustard aren't too bad, but Pigeon has a ton of fallout. I have to use really specific brushes for it to not make an enormous mess, and even then it's probably still about to make a mess on my face. Now I'm going to take Slice from the Jeffree Star Mini Breaker palette and put it all over the lid. And just like we did on the top, I'm gonna just grab Pigeon again, and I'm gonna just put it on the outer corner to give a little bit more depth and darkness. Now I'm going back in with that color Fly that I used for my highlight, and I'm just going to brighten up the inner corners a little bit. And now, just to make this a little more dark and spooky, I'm just adding to underneath. So this is the basics of the Gothic Fairy makeup. You can do this in any color scheme that you want, whatever makes you happy, and you don't necessarily have to stop here. What I like to do myself is go back in with that liquid eyeliner and add a lot of cute leafy designs and stuff. You can do that, you can leave it as is, you can add gemstones to your face and a flower crown, anything you want to make it look more fairy-like in your opinion. opinion. But this is the basics of just what you lay down first, and I hope you enjoyed this. As always, do something that makes you happy today, no matter what anyone else thinks about it, and I will see all of you tomorrow.